Hello, this is Greg Allison with Green Greg's Garden and Worm Farm. Coming to you today, the 20th of February, 22. On time on deck is 21:4400 hours Central Standard Time. Today, the world stands at the precipice of the largest war in Europe since World War II. As a matter of fact, this could escalate into full-blown WW3. Well, let's hope and pray that's not the case, but it may indeed be the case. Now, it just so happens that all of this really rests upon a decision to be made by one man. One man is apparently the key to this whole thing, and that is Vladimir Putin. So it bears asking, what is it that Vladimir Putin wants, really? Because apparently he's going to make this decision. Now, how that all plays out after he makes that decision, that's a whole different matter. Some of you say, oh, no, he'll never do this. He don't want to. Well, we'll discuss that. But we're also going to discuss what is it driving Vladimir Putin? Where is he coming from? These are important things to know to assess just what he might do. Now, all this may be moot in a matter of a few hours or a few days. A lot of things are hanging in the balance right now. But there's also a potential summit coming up within hours, supposedly, between Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden. Will it make a difference? Or will it just mean more kabuki theater? What's happening? We're going to go all into this. I bring this as part of my Eyes Wide Open and Head on a Swivel series so that you can know what's coming at you, so that you'll know prepare to get ready. We hope and pray for the best, but you must prepare for the worst, because indeed it can happen. What is the worst? We'll have to talk about that, and that varies somewhat too. Well, the worst is the worst. Will we go that far? I hope not. But I do videos to prepare people for these kind of things. My Eyes Wide Open and Head on a Swivel series to prepare you for the thought of what might come, and also my videos that talk to you about how to eat free from the weeds and the trees. I got wild edible videos. I also do videos on gardening, a lot of gardening videos. This is Green Greg's Garden and Worm Farm, by the way. Thank you, Rex Bear, for the shirt. So consider these things, that you should watch my videos, subscribe to my channel, bang the notification bell, and click all to get more of this type of information. This is good for sharing with your friends and neighbors, so they can also get the idea they may need to prepare, so they'll have stores of their own, so when they get hungry, they don't come and eat you. That's the primary purpose there, right? But along that line, I got some other good news for you. Yes, indeed. So that you can have something to eat for yourself. And who knows, maybe you'll share a little bit. You know, I don't think you can share too much, but I got good news. We have a special right now. If you go to prepwithgregs.com, you can get $50 off a 4-week supply of food that lasts 25 years. And you get $150 off a 3-month supply. 4 weeks is 2 of these buckets. This is a 2-week supply in this bucket. You get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 2,000 calories a day, desserts, and drinks even. Hey, this will make you a winner and help keep hunger away. Check it out. Prepwithgreg.com. $150 off 3-month supply, $50 off a 4-week supply. Hard to beat, especially with that kind of food that lasts that long. And with that packaging, you can bear it in caches. It's easy to carry and bug out. Also, when you go to prepwithgreg.com, check the My Patriot Supply banner on top and click it, and you can go in. They're simply the best in the industry in terms of having the widest selection of long-term food storage and many other items of prepping supplies too, from water filtration, air filtration, and things that you may need in your camp and bug out sites. So check them out, prepwithgreg.com. All right, enough said for that. We're going to go into this stuff. I know, guys, I'm going to share some articles with you to paint some perspective here on these matters, kind of give you this glimpse into the soul of Vladimir Putin. And here is one of the older articles published back in April 25th, 2005. And this was published in BBC News. I actually use the date format. I typically use a military day, month, year. All right, so Mr. Putin, in his annual State of the Nation address, he had this to say that year to the Duma in Russia. And he said that to break up by the USSR in 1991 was a real drama. But his biggest statement was this: the collapse of the Soviet Union equates to being the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. What else happened in the 20th century? World War I, World War II, the Holocaust. Actually, one of his predecessors, or well, maybe not his predecessor, since it was under the rule of communism, Stalin, often maybe 60 million Russians. You know, Mao Zedong, maybe often 80 million Chinese. You know, the dropping of bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the whole pantheon of everything that went on in World War II, World War I before it, and even the 1918 Spanish flu. None of these compare to him. To him, the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe. Of course, pandemic wouldn't be a geopolitical, but holy blocking smoke on moly. Even the Russian invasion, the Nazi invasion of Russia don't even count, to them in this category, not to Vladimir Putin. So a lot of people think Vladimir Putin is out to rebuild the Soviet Union. However, bear in mind, you should know, is that he has the photo of, or a painting of Peter the Great on his wall. So his ambition really is to rebuild the Russian Empire as it used to be, apparently. And how much he can do that, it's not practically he could do all that, but if he could get bits and pieces of it, maybe that's his aim, maybe that's his goal, and maybe not, but he definitely thinks in these terms. So how do we know that? We know that from several things. Hang on. We're going to look at a paper that he wrote. Bang. Here we go. This is a paper. It's huge, long treatise. On and on and on and on, okay, that he wrote back in last year, not even a year ago, 12 July 21. He says, during the recent direct line, when I was asked, somebody's asking questions about Russian-Ukrainian relations, I said the Russians and Ukrainians were one people, a single whole. These words were not driven by short-term considerations or prompted by the current political context. It is what I have said on numerous occasions and what I firmly believe. I therefore feel it is necessary to explain my position in detail and share my assessments of today's situation. And he goes on, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, believe you me, I'm just going to read a couple sentences out of the next paragraph. First of all, I would like to emphasize that the wall that has emerged in recent years between Russia, Ukraine, and between the parts of what is essentially the same historical and spiritual space, to my mind, is our great common misfortune and tragedy. So he believes the great misfortune and tragedy above and beyond the breakup of the Soviet Union is the separation from Ukraine. If you go on down in this article, you'll see it also includes Lithuania, Rus, previous empire, and of course Kiev, Rush, and Belarus. And he basically goes through a big, long historical treatise and goes further into other things here. But I can understand this to a degree. I understand some where he's coming from historical context, because Russia started in Kiev. Yes, indeed. Kiev was the first capital of the Russian people. But things have changed a lot since way back then. We're talking mid-11th century was the peak of this empire. And where did it start? Well, it's believed it started from the Vikings. That Russia descended from Vikings. In fact, Viking Oleg, the ruler of Novgorod, from about 1879 to 1882. So he seized Kiev, but he also defeated the Khazars. You might know of Khazaria. Some of you may have heard of Khazaria. Well, he defeated them. So there were already people there. They went in and invaded and defeated them, and maybe drove them out, or maybe drove some of them out and interbred with them. Who knows how that really panned out. A lot of that's lost in the sands of time as to how that played out, probably. You know, Oleg's successor, Igor. Igor. Yeah, that's where we get all these names, Igor, whatever. So you can see, oh, that's beautiful churches. Yeah. So Russia started out in Kiev, but Ukraine and Kiev evolved differently, and Russia evolved differently. And Russia's capital is in Moscow, and Kiev broke out. And in Kiev today, they speak a different language. It's called Ukrainian. Yeah, it's got probably a lot of similar roots to Russian. And Vladimir Putin said they all stem from old Russian. Well, but Kiev also got, Ukraine had other invasions of other peoples from other areas after that time. This is one of the most widely invaded territories in the world, is that sweep of plains, which is today Ukraine. Yeah, it's been invaded by many forces throughout history. And apparently that is not ended, or so it seems, possibly. Now, a lot of you are going to say, oh, he will not possibly invade Ukraine. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on there right now. New explosions shake the rebel-held Donetsk as Russia invasion fears intensify. And what it's alleged is that the separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk are firing artillery over into Russia, so it could be blamed on the Ukrainians and also into the Ukraine, excuse me, so that the Ukrainians would be prompted to attack the Russians. Well, I suppose they're firing both ways, or is different people firing each way? Do we have false flags going from each side, both sides? What's the reality of the situation, my friends? There's a lot of fishy stuff going on here, and people are trying to prompt the fighting in the war. They're asking for trouble. So who's really behind this? And of course, just this very day that I'm still in here, Russia launched their nuclear war games today, which they went in and launched a lot of their ICBMs. They also launched their short-range ballistic missiles, such as the Iskander. And this is probably an Iskander here. Like that. No, it's a Kinzhal ballistic missile. Okay, this has got 1,500 miles range. And here is the Russian Yars intercontinental ballistic missile being launched 19th of February, 22. And Vladimir Putin directly oversaw, here's the Iskander being launched. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that Russians have in the theater. They are active right now, which we don't have anything comparable to, and yet they complain about our missiles being in the area, which is, not the case. But that is not in terms of nothing that threatens Moscow. Yeah, here's their bombers. So they actually just practiced nuclear war games in Russia. Why? To tell us to stay out, maybe? Was that a warning? These war games usually come later. Why they practiced them when they did? So we go back into this, guys. What you see here is a picture emerging of Putin. Let me, oh, by the way, there is a possibility, as I mentioned earlier, for some kind of a peace deal to come up between Biden and Putin. This article don't seem to want to load. My memory is kind of overloaded here with the stuff I've already got in here. There we go. Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin accepted the principle of a summit. Okay, on condition of Russia not invading. Okay, that's just crashing out here. I'm gonna stop the share. Hello. All right. In that big long treatise, that big long one I showed you that Vladimir Putin wrote, like he said, he spent a lot of time talking about all this historical context, trying to make his case. It's a very convoluted, long history, and it leaves a lot of room for a lot of the wearing of rose-colored glasses. You see the world and reinforce what you see and understand in your worldview according to what you already know, what you already think. Everybody has a worldview, and once you got a worldview, you take in information in such a way typically it reinforces what you already think. So you interpret the history and everything else along those lines, and that's just what most people, almost everybody, does. And of course, Vladimir Putin is having his stab at that. And of course, he's also trying to make his case to the world for Ukraine and Belarus and maybe even Lithuania all being one. I'm gonna tell you something. People in Lithuania, Estonia, and especially the Estonians, man, they have no love, none, zips, nada for Russia. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, they do not want anything to do with Russia. They have a great deal of unlove. Let me put it that way. Let me try to be charitable in my description of how they feel. It's very extremely negative. And Ukraine, you know, when you know, I stayed in Cosmo, what is the Cosmo something hotel when I was in Russia back in March of 2010. And not too far a walk from there is their space museum, and just past their space museum is this grand plaza of pavilions, and it's a big park, and they have a pavilion building for every republic that was in the Soviet Union, including Ukraine. And the Russians were close to the Ukrainians. I knew a Ukrainian who served in the Red Army. We called him, his name he went by was Roy, but we all teased him and called him Big Hat because he had a picture of his big Russian, hat. I was about to wear the big hat. So that was our nickname for him. He was actually a pretty good, fellow in terms of his disposition about things. He was a coworker, believe it or not. He got an American citizenship and became a coworker when I was working space station payload integration for Teledyne Brown Engineering on subcontract to Boeing many moons ago. Now, I went to Russia. When I was there, I had a Russian woman trying to fix me up with a Ukrainian woman. Want me to, well, marry this Ukrainian woman, I guess. I was not exactly attracted to her though. And we had, Gorbachev. Gorbachev was the last leader of the Soviet Union when it broke up. His mom was Ukrainian. So, that gives you a little picture that, the two have been closely linked, but it was not always been a love relationship. Ukraine evolved differently than Russia. They speak a different language primarily. Only 17% of the people in Ukraine speak Russian. And as a matter of fact, the people of Ukraine predominantly speak Ukrainian. And that in mind, they have evolved separately in a different direction from Russia. And some of this is because they're not ethnically necessarily the same either, because there's been other, like I said, invasions and things going on through the sands of time there. So it's a very convoluted picture that Vladimir Putin is trying to paint. And as a matter of fact, now some of the previous leaders of Russia, when they tried to lure, was bringing Ukraine into the Soviet Union, they stuck out some carrots, to them. Like, for example, Donetsk actually tried to separate from Ukraine back in 1921. They then had formed a separate republic, and Vladimir Lenin refused to accept them into Russia. Of course, all the Ukraine was coming to the Soviet Union anyway, and that was the big government. So he refused to accept them and made them stay in Ukraine, maybe as an olive branch to Ukraine. And of course, we know in the 50s, Crimea was actually given to Ukraine. But why not? It was all one big Soviet Union, one big happy family. We're all still under the master control of Moscow through the Soviet Union. So why not do that? But we see that's caused consternation down the road. Now, if you actually look within in Russia and in Ukraine, the next sub-level of governance, like in the United States, we got states. State means country, by the way. And within our states, we have counties. The analogy somewhere in Russia and Ukraine for the next lower level of government is something kind of between a state and a county in terms of power, and it's called oblast. And Donetsk and Luhansk are two of the oblasts that collectively are called Donbass. And they are petitioned to become a separate republic. But on the Minsk agreement, they're just an autonomous region within Ukraine. and they're supposed to be respected by both sides and no fighting, blah, 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 and it's not happening. And each side blames others. By the way, Putin is blaming the Ukrainians for the loss of the now 15,000 people. And of course, Ukrainians are blaming the Russians for that. You know, there have been 15,000 Ukrainians of either side, apparently, whether they're Donetsk or Luhansk or over in Ukraine, maybe even on the Russian side, who've lost their lives through this conflict. So, as you know, I've always said that people should have the right to self-determination. I believe that the people of Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk collectively should be able to decide what their fate is. If they want to be an independent republic, they should be able to get a vote. Now, maybe Russia don't want them. Kind of doubt that the way things are going. Maybe they don't want them in a republic. Maybe they'd be happier if they stayed an independent state. Apparently, they were content at one time that they be a autonomous region. So it's possible that Vladimir Putin is just trying to protect those people within that area, and the people of Donbass really talk like that's what they believe, and they believe that they need to be protected from Ukraine. They talk about the fear of a Ukrainian invasion of their territory, yet they seemingly are firing artillery to invite a Ukrainian invasion to justify the Russians to come in. I don't know, it gets very complicated. So the problem is we're in the fog of pre-war here, and it's a real fog, and deception is the #1 name of the game. So what's really going on? What's really going on? So there's another possibility Putin I'm going to get into. Another thing that it seems to make some sense, because, you know, I could see, you know, Russians supposedly have 190,000 troops on board. Oh yeah, by the way, they're calling up the reservists now, and they're moving new equipment in right now. You know, they said they were withdrawn, but yeah, they're still moving in new equipment. Now, one would think that, you know, since their number of troops on the border, not how many they have overall, but the number on the border is roughly at parity with the number of troops within Ukraine, when you normally need a 3-to-1 advantage to invade, that maybe they don't plan a full-scale invasion. Maybe they just plan to go part way. I mean, initially, you know, they can make a deep penetration or a good penetration at first and then get bogged down. So maybe if they were smart, they would pick what their objectives are, go there and stop, declare victory, and, you know, then negotiate from that point that whatever's to come next. That's the way that Vladimir Putin could save some face. But the fact that they have so much, well, it's not the numerical manpower, it's the equipment they have. Their equipment force is far outnumbers what Ukraine has. And a lot of people think because of that the Russians would have victory in 72 hours and totally take over Ukraine if they so chose. I'm not convinced that's the case, because they're pretty much restricted to travel on the highways, which are a bunch of poor roads, with all that armor, since the fields are starting to get mushy. And highways, you become a sitting target on a highway. So that's not good for an invading force, especially when you're counting on that equipment that's going to be setting ducks to give you the upper hand, the advantage, the force multiplier, because the other side don't have it. Of course, Ukraine doesn't have the air power, and that may be Russia's trump card is the air power, and that might be what protects those lines moving in. So the real question is, if Russia was only planning to take Ukraine's Donbass region, why would they have all the forces in the Black Sea to help? Why would they have forces going all the way around the western side of Ukraine and up in Belarus? And from Belarus, they can make a quick jaunt down into Kyiv, apparently. They really surrounded Ukraine. And maybe they're prepared to bring other forces in rapidly behind that. Given all that, you would have to say it looks like they're planning a full-scale invasion. You know, you must, now they're not going to do that. Well, they're also bringing up their blood supplies and medical stuff. And just the nature of the events that are going down now, the bombings, the explosions, the exchange of artillery fire, the destruction of pipelines, there's a lot of stuff going on right now as a preliminary setup. So one could say it's possible, and again, it's in the mind of Putin, Okay, guys, whatever's in the mind of Putin is what it is. And I'm not sitting there trying to take sides, guys. There's a little bit of wrong on both sides. The whole idea that Ukraine thinks it's got to hold on to Donbass and is that obsessiveness that they can't get rid of that, but that's what can cost them their own existence. Because Russia feels the same way about Ukraine. Oh, we're all one. We should be one. How come we're not one? And therein lies the dilemma at the core of Putin. Putin, it could be. It's like that romantic lover, the man whose girlfriend decided she can't live with this guy. He's abusive. And man, I got to get out of this relationship. And besides, I got better prospects over here. And she skirts away. Well, it may be this romantic lover tries in some way to lure her over back, but maybe he's just not so finesse in his abilities to do that. So in the end, as she scoots away, he resorts to violence to keep her, to abuse her, to beat her up. The boyfriend that beats up the girlfriend who's fleeing to get away. Maybe she's already left. They've had the divorce, and that's the case. Ukraine's a separate country. They already had the divorce, and now she's courting somebody else, and he wants to beat the living snot out of her for it. Is that where we're at? Is that the case? Do you think a guy should have the right to beat the snot out of an ex-wife who's left and divorced? Some of you do. Some of you believe that. But, you know, I'll tell you, I don't think anybody's got a right to own somebody else. We all should be free to pick our associations. And if you really love someone, you will make conditions for them where they would want nothing else but to be with you. But Vladimir Putin, I got something to say to you there, fella. You're not winning any hearts and minds in Ukraine. If you're wanting the Ukraine to come back into your arms, you've blown it, buddy. You have really blown it, because you can't just threaten them and scare the wits out of them and expect they're going to come back and be in love with you. No, you've done just the opposite. You've driven them away. You have driven them away. You have really hardened their case against you. And even though you might catch them, they're going to be squirming and biting and hating you every moment of the time. So you are creating a bad situation. This is not the way to do it. Maybe he knows that. Maybe he won't go in for that reason. And for that reason, a lot of Russians, including some Russian generals, they don't want to invade Ukraine. They'll do what they're ordered to do, though, apparently, unless they stage a coup. They'll do what they want to do, what they want him to do, what he wants them to do. Putin right now is in charge. It's Putin's decision. But is Putin that jilted lover, jilted, domineering, abusive lover who will beat the snot out of somebody just because they left him? He's tried to lure him in, oh yeah, well, the whole thing with the invasion back in 2014. Well, you've already slapped her around some. Yeah, you've already slapped her, you've hit her, you've killed thousands of her people, and you expect that she'll just be okay with that. You threaten to do it again, maybe kill hundreds of thousands of her people this time, and she's just going to come back and be your loving partner from ever forward. That you'll be one happy people after you run over them like that. Oh yeah. Yeah, Russia did go into Ukraine back in the Great Depression and took all the farmers' food away from them. They were starving. The farmers in the breadbasket of Europe were starving thanks to Russia. Well, there you go. You see what I'm saying? Russia has gave apples and fruits to Ukraine to try to lure them back in time. But you got to remember that, Putin. You see that? Maybe you forgot that part of it. You forgot to buy her the box of chocolates. Instead, you hit her in the nose. Wow, that's not how it goes. if you give the lady a rose, don't hit her in the nose. But you've blown it. You've already blown it, Putin. You'll never have the love of Ukraine that you might have had. It'll be a long time before that could ever come again. It's probably not happening. you've probably done the permanent damage. So maybe you should just minimize your losses at this point. And I hope maybe somebody gets this message to you in some fashion so you can think about it. I'm here to tell you there's good and bad people in every nation on earth. Every race, color, creed, every religion, and every state, oblast, county, shire, hamlet, whatever you want to call it. And every Dell and Green. Ever seen. There's people. Well, you're gonna find bad people nowhere, but I think predominantly most people are good. A lot of them are deceived. A lot of them have been, brainwashed by the powers that be. But basically, there are people that want the same thing in heart, and are good people who would give you the shirt off their back. Hey, I enjoyed my trip to Russia, to Moscow, very much. I actually did. I actually felt at home there. In many ways. Even more so than when I went to Italy. And Italy's supposed to be one of our allies. Maybe the joint Viking ancestry. I don't know, but I felt at home there. So the funny thing is that it's not the people that we need to worry about. It's the leadership. The leaderships of our countries in the world are what get us in trouble. And when here in the United States, we got nothing to brag about in terms of our leadership. Nothing at all. I don't see anything to go bragging and beat my chest about right now. But Vladimir Putin is, I think, really blowing it right now. I think he is. Maybe he don't intend to go in, but with what's already happened in 2014, and just putting everybody at the border the way he is now, the tensions that have been raised, I don't see him courting Ukraine successfully going forward due to that. I don't see that being a successful relationship, even if he forces it. I have a hard time envisioning that. And if you don't go in, if that's not been his intention at all, I think it's going south. But what I'm saying here is I know one thing. The decision at this point is going to be Vladimir's. There's also on our side, how's our leadership going to react? Should our relationship bend over because somebody threatens them? Should you, because there's a bully on the playground, do you need to give him your lunch money? Wow. Yeah, a lot of people do that. A lot of people give that bully their lunch money every day. There's always some spunky little kid who goes, oh, yeah. There's always something that's going to put that guy down. Little scrappy guy sometimes. The way you keep that bully from being the bully is you be bigger than him. But we've gone soft. And that's why this is happening, my friends. This is why this is happening. We've gone soft, and they smell our weakness, and now they're taking advantage. Okay, I've been on this enough. But what I'm seeing here, if Putin goes in, if he goes in and invades, then we know where his heart is. He's that bully. He's that abusive lover. Will beat the snot out of the girl for leaving him and drag her back into his house, kicking and screaming against her will. Caveman style. The hair of her head, club in one hand and her hair in his hand, dragging her back in his house. That's what an invasion is, in a sense. It's ugly. Let's hope it don't happen. But we'll know in a few days, probably. A few days. So I'm going to do another video about nuclear survival, nuclear war survival, nuclear event survival. Might record it tonight, maybe tomorrow, probably tomorrow. And we'll be talking about what it takes to get through these things, because even if this resolves itself peacefully, Russia has a peripheral of new advanced weapon systems that will scare the bejesus out of you. And then China is developing weapon systems, intercontinental ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles very fast. North Korea is developing stuff. Iran is developing stuff. And we're looking at having, once we had a Cold War with one adversary, now we're looking at a Cold War with two serious adversaries and a couple of adversaries that could take us down with an EMP and really hurt us a lot. So we are in trying times, my friends. So we better understand how to survive should things go the worst course, which could happen as part of what's going down now. Let's hope and pray not. But always prepare for the worst, pray for the best. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and pray about it. And get yourself centered. Be right with your maker, and mentally go through what can happen. So you're not caught like a deer in the headlights and catatonic shock when things go down on the bad side. Should that happen? Don't panic. So that is a form of panic, by the way. Panic serves no one, ever. Never panic. And if they're coming at you with everything, you just sit there and calculate how to whip them. Don't sit there and go, ah! All right, enough said. Bye, folks. Thank you very much for watching. And with that, I'm going to say,